where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that you're a part of a protest, and when it really comes down to figuring out the heart of this protest, you find out that it's really a part of a video, and you open this video and you see a man in a mask, and this man in a mask is he is listing off 5 demands that are at the heart of this protest. So, this report is on If We Burn by Vincent Evans. Now, this guy covers mass protests all across the world, and in terms of the renovation of society, this book is obviously near and dear to my cause, and I'm really hoping that I went into this really with a mindset of learning more about protests around the world, and the success is what makes a success. The failure is what makes a protest fail, and a variety of things, in between in terms of organizing effectively. Now, this is this book. It comes with some language, that is really intellectuals would really be familiar with, but in terms of this guy, where I really like this guy in this environment, even why I would really want an intellectual in this environment, because it kind of puts a real thought behind the action, and I had an appreciation, even though I found it incredibly frustrating at some points, but it was really it's really nice to see that. I think we play with the term armchair intellectual a lot, and it's the idea of what I view as really an intellect, or someone who speaks flowery language, and they remain disconnected from the actual actions that create the world around them. And that disconnect is pretty heavy with this particular group of people. But in terms of this book right here, I think it's really putting rubber to the road for a lot of people. Now, this idea of mass protests, there's some pretty serious extremes that come along with mass protest, and this guy, he goes on to describe a variety of things. At one point, he describes breaking up somebody or police shooting into a crowd, and that's and I think he was in Brazil at that point, or somewhere in South America. I forget where exactly, but that is in terms of breaking up a protest of people shooting into a crowd. You really don't see that happening, or you don't see the possibilities of that really becoming a reality for for us in America, but I really do encourage people to learn more about the idea of where we're going. And I do think of these situations these situations that happen abroad in terms of being reminded when it comes down to where we're heading as a people. He also goes in to describe how Occupy Wall Street really left a legacy of, among protesters everywhere. And I think we really don't talk about Occupy Wall Street enough, but apparently there was this idea of really setting the precedence for a lot of protests thereafter. This movement was big. I remember hearing about this, of course. It didn't seem so big, of course, because I was getting, really this story. I think I was in, I was definitely in school. I forget which school, and I was probably preoccupied with just being, one of those, people in school who are just so fixated on their books and everything else. But in terms of the legacy that it left, it is it's really something to hear about. They had a whole bunch of different names, Occupy, or as Occupy the Capitol or something like that. But they had names, and it was really something that went beyond. It was really something that was soaked up beyond just that particular moment in this in that particular time period. Very important. Also, in terms of solidarity in these particular mindsets, I really it came down to I've written down here that solidarity is important, and that idea is really coming to an understanding, and the understanding being really the robbery that both parties are complicit in. And I think that is extremely important in terms of moving forward now. But like this this guy, he didn't have the this particular book in mind in terms of this particular. It doesn't, he was interviewed at some point, the guy in the opening, where we talk about how this list of demands that that led that was really the focal point for this protest. That was not something that this guy consciously came about, or not. I won't say consciously. It wasn't something that was really well thought out by this guy. It was just a list of demands, I think, that he found on online, and he decided, hey, look, this is great. And of course, when it comes down to random people making list demands, I'm really not necessary. It comes down to that person's understanding of the world and things of that nature. But one thing's for sure is we want a very solid list of demands that really outlines the robbery that in America's case, both parties are complicit in, and really exposes that to a degree. Um, like one of my focuses is affordable housing, and this seems like it seems like something that the left would kind of lean towards in a certain case, but but when you really dig down and really see what stops affordable housing from coming up, you get down to a more complicated nature of affordable housing period in a given point, and it's very much something that should be studied and something that should be understood. The idea of nonprofits kind of having a revolving door between people who start or lead nonprofits to the political world, and just the element of art. How helpful are these particular initiatives that come up on how helpful or effective these initiatives are. And our politicians doing what they can, or doing what they really can do in terms of with a lot of this stuff. Something that I had to kind of battle with was the idea that everybody's not a villain. In terms of when it comes down to, when I say everybody, I mean leadership is not necessarily corrupt, by nature of leadership. I think leadership in terms of speaking for a group of people. But right now, it in terms of our system of who speaks for the people, we do have things that are very much that they're very much that they violate and continue to violate, and through this whole two-party system, it seems like it's almost it's really, I think it's been exposed like lately in terms of 2020 to now. I think it's been exposed in terms of how how useless this party system really is. But in terms of the usefulness of the upper echelon to be able to I think it is powerful for them to categorize leaderships into boxes according to how they really get people emotionally invested in different particular in different orders or fashions. Now, when it comes down to solidarity, this idea of this image that we have of this guy in a mask giving 5 demands, those demands are extremely important, especially when we talk about the renovation, rather than, we're not calling for a revolution, and I don't encourage people to call for a revolution. I think a renaissance is better, because in terms of an appreciation for civil society, I think we should keep that in terms of the changes, and just be more precise in terms of what's not working. When it comes down to solidarity, really understanding and kind of calling for a more precise call out for this. Recently, the idea of really people on the out or people on the outskirts investigating inside has kind of has definitely piqued my interest, because it's just like when you see people willing to call power out, I think we should definitely look at like that. Look at from a standpoint of they understand, if they understand what's wrong in terms of this particular situation, let's listen more about that. But also, these are the people who need to be like put in charge of certain situations, in terms of like people willing to speak out. There's a tremendous amount of like the people in power now that are complicit in one way or another, but we really, really really want to call these guys out. And in terms of solidarity, the demands that I have are like really, really, they're back. They're investigations, and the idea of really being investigated, of course, is investigations from the outside of the government, in terms of because it does appear that we have people that we can trust in certain situations, and I do want to take advantage of that. And the idea of solidarity being important, a group of people saying, hey, this is how we really, really expect things to work here. I do believe, like, it's the political leader's job to listen to the populace, and when you have an educated populace, you can no longer shrug off demands as easily. Now, when it came down to solidarity, of course, bird sounds, whistles, I think are, a nice touch for this particular call that I'm making. But in others, they had like people, they mentioned people with like black and white suits. I think they call those penguin protests. They also had people with like people who held, or like protesters who held the umbrella as a symbol of really the idea, or really the illusion of protection that the government really gives us in a lot of situations. In some protests, they were even doing like redoing the Constitution. Multiple versions came up, and there was multiple people working on that. He also mentions really how chaos takes form, and I think it was a protest, particularly in Brazil, where he watched like police officers basically prop up on a wall while while kids were going around robbing people, and basically pickpocketing. And it was it's you really don't want the protest to degrade to that manner. Definitely something that we want to watch out for when we do protest is the solidarity. I think particularly this element of bird noises and whistle making is great, but it can take form and take shape in a lot of different ways when we talk about this particular protest. Organizations of like basically group in terms of groups, they were like also people involved with workers unions and and different like existing organizations, and it it really seems like we should be more understand, or in terms of this idea of a hierarchy in existence, having an understanding that and a hierarchy, like I said before, leadership or representation doesn't necessarily have to be corrupt by nature. And reaching out to existing organizations and really seeing what happens, when we do get more detailed about these particular organizations, and how we can involve like different organizations in any mass movement in the future. One thing I note was Brazil made a pretty huge swing from Democrat to Republican ran, and I think they call it like I don't. There's a distinction between like the hard right, the middle right, the kind of soft right, and then like the middle, and they make that distinction. But there was like a pretty hard swing from Democrat to Republican, and that was like something that I think a lot of us, when it comes down to swaying a populace, I think this is a result of really not a disconnection between the people and really the political class itself. To have that swing, and misrepresentation, I think is really what caused that. He mentions how at some point the UN removed Brazil from its list of hunger or nations that are hungry, which is great. I think, of course, when it comes down to our capability, I think we need to be shamed for things like Flint, Michigan. We need to be shamed for our failing infrastructure in a lot of different cases. And I think really I imagine that the UN, in terms of its list, I would like to see this UN include the idea of our failing infrastructure on that list, to understand, to really hold it up and broadcast the idea of are we really a first world society? Now, in terms of the idea of revolutions, you kind of this idea of a revolution is, of course, we'd lose a lot of people by simply lack of infrastructure to help a lot of help people who who are handicapped or who have needs. But also this idea of revolution brings about a class of people who may be energized by having a particular enemy. And the problem with that is these, you're never. I heard that during revolts in the slave days, or slavery revolts, there wasn't a precision, or there wasn't. They would kill everybody, and this would include women and children. And this idea of it's something that a lot of people would be ashamed of, but during imagine trying to ask someone to be more precise in their violence. I think that's a hefty ask, and more than likely you'll be at the receiving end of any violence by nature of even asking that question. But the idea of a revolution and how people are targeted, or how people may become the cause of, the idea of Hitler and the idea of Holocaust, Holocaust, the Holocaust in general, I think is huge, and I think is something that that really this speaks about. Like when it comes down to really, really energizing a populace of people behind an enemy, it's something that is easy to do, but it has disastrous consequences. Another thing that this guy, Vincent, brings up is this gap in power, and he strikes the chord with the idea of we don't know who is up next in the queue, and this idea of creating this void in terms of representation could easily lead to someone worse taking power, and lead to a worse situation in terms of for a nation of people, or for a group of any group of people, and us really not having that laid out to where we understand and the danger of that. I think one of my favorite quotes from the book was where he quotes I forget who he quotes exactly, but the idea of a protest by itself being simply a group of people yelling to the upper echelon saying, "We don't like this, you fix this." And that is it's I think it, of course it does get more complicated, protest to protest, but that idea of really understanding this pressure has to come with demands, or people will try to figure out the demands for you, and this idea of trying to be more precise in terms of this this movement, and the idea of intellectuals who take action is going to be tremendous, I think, in really creating the ideal society. This idea of we aren't happy and you fix this isn't enough. Like this is, I don't think this should be acceptable for any protest, but especially for the idea of a renovation of any kind. There was a point where Vincent mentions how technology changes the landscape for politics, and he brings up an image of how people would trade in their guns for cell phones because of really how much power was there. And the idea of an empowered populace coming behind this element of cell phones, I think should definitely be more widespread and be more well known in terms of really what happens here, or what should take place in terms of the markation for technology in any society, especially as widespread as this idea of cell phones. It's definitely something that it seems, regardless of how we're being influenced now by social media, it's a tremendous potential and wrapped into this that we really, really need to uncover. Now, the revolution was not televised in many cases, and this was something that was made very much apparent. Media didn't make it known a lot of the times in terms of mainstream media. When it comes down to a protest, a lot of mainstream media is essentially funded or backed by people who are in power now. And, thinking about right now, like, I think there was like some kind of leak of information from the Pentagon, and before, in earlier days, you'd have a press conference where there were some pretty tough questions asked about the contents of that leak. And I think earlier, I want to say it was earlier this year, the press conference most recently, it was about how are you, the government, going to protect us, the citizens, by making sure this doesn't happen anymore. And it's a very stark contrast, and it's a very real contrast, and in terms of the idea of having your press credentials being like a privilege of sorts, in terms of you're on our side, you're in, it's almost like a joke and a game at that, but it's reality at a lot of these, apparently at these press conferences. And it is, to be frank with you, it's really, really disgusting to think that this is that this is acceptable in any way. But the idea simply of revolutions not being televised in any way, shape, or form, I think we really have to understand and be aware that the suppression is going to happen. I think when it comes down to this idea of giving corporations more power to silence voices, that you don't disagree, that you disagree with. This is essentially the noose that's gonna hang you one day when you speak against power. And you start you're the one spreading this misinformation, and now when the government turns against you, and there's all kinds of instances where of course, where I think Black Lives Matter, the protests, they had there were situations and instances where the government was spying on these on protesters or people who went to these protests, just like January 6th. The idea was you're a problem, we need to watch you. And this was this idea of really, really understanding that you're never the government's friend, when you don't trust the government. You know what I'm saying? You should never view you should always be skeptical of what they ask of you in a lot of situations. When it comes down to another thing that Vincent brings up is some leaders were pro-protest, and they make that very clear. And that idea of a leader, a leader kind of making a stand. I think it was he was in South America a lot. I want to say he was trying, like, this leader was trying to reach across like boundaries to to different leaders to get help, but at some point it was just like, hey, look, we actually support the idea of protest, and it's clear that the people aren't happy, and if it's come down to them not being happy with you, then that's kind of what it is. And I think that's very much it's very much where we want people to be. We don't want when it comes down to society, when there's when there is a significant population within that, or when there's significant like amounts of that society that aren't happy, then I think we want them with a voice, and it's very clear that we're in that situation now to where it's not isolated, left or right. I think a lot of people need to understand that where like both parties are complicit in terms of this idea of robbing society in a lot of different ways. Robbing the people, and I think this idea of corruption isn't necessarily isolated to one or the other. Vincent brings up how also the end of protest was a big deal. Without that defined end, it became kind of things just kind of fizzled out, and people may just when you don't really have that structure, a lot of people are just simply going to go home after. That idea of going back to the way things were, and essentially find a way to fall on, and just kind of be happier with the given situation. It's almost like all right, I guess I'll go back to work now. Like it's crazy, but it's really it's life for a lot of people. At some point, this Ukrainian leader got exposed as like a Russian puppet, and it was like he ends up or there's a mass protest, and everybody's advising him, hey man, don't leave, and this guy, he like ends up going literally back, or literally to Russia, and like to the to get protection. And it's surreal to think that a leader could leave their country and go somewhere where they're protected, but that is apparently like this idea of being a puppet for Russia, it was a safe haven, like, hey, look, man, things aren't really going so good, in Ukraine. And it was pretty funny, but I think it's pretty much something we need to look out for in the future, in terms of really understanding these leaders to an element of where do you call a safe haven? Where's home for you? You know what I'm saying? Like what is that for you? Because a lot, like, I think we'll be surprised a lot of times it may not be like amongst the people that they're supposedly representing. There's also an instance where where protests protests in a given in a given area or time period, they were known for like destroying car dealerships, and this this something it was something particular with car dealerships in general in terms of how they were complicit in terms of I think it could have been, the government, or the actual like representative really like investing into car dealerships or something like that, but it was something that was really protests in the area were known for. Uh, um, I think this is also something. Where do our representatives get money from? Where they, is that what can we look at in terms of what can we really extract, from really understanding them from a financial background. But also, it mentions in terms of there was also sports teams or sports fans that were very much interested in that, interested and played a huge role into like a lot of protests. And I view like a lot of like into music, and the music and entertainment industry is like really the coliseum today in terms of how a lot of like the idea of like gladiators looking at what we have, looking at this idea of keeping everyone distracted. And I just like seeing the fact that these sports fans actually played a huge role. I just imagine that completely. Like, you thought you had, a distraction, and things going completely to shit. It was pretty funny. But in terms of of course, when a sports team comes up, a lot of sports teams are known for like, when it comes down to just naturally being willing to do violence or commit violent acts. I think it's something that's always, that you kind of always look at as really easier with these groups of people. Another thing where the element in the when you have a stage, there being kind of that naturally being something to where a leader must be present, or a leader, group of leaders must be present, because the element of a stage is, somebody has to really decide who speaks, when they speak, why they speak, like somebody has to categorize that. And that kind of really being naturally natural when it comes down to stages, and their appearance is basically meaning that there's a leader in a way. And it's important to understand, a lot of really, when it comes down to successful protest, what is this stage, who's going to speak, and those things kind of naturally being a thought process that someone thinks about, or that someone's had, someone's really behind. One thing that a lot of us are kind of somewhat understanding now is the idea that a lot of politicians will false claim the idea of being outsiders, and the element of them being outside the system. When we think about people outside the system, what is that really? Because when I think about people like Elon Musk, we're talking about people who are essentially government. Like Elon wouldn't have a business if it wasn't for government contracting. When it comes down to like people like Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook is complicit in so many different ways with the government. We have to really understand that this idea of outsiders not necessarily meaning that they're career politicians, what are we really talking about when we say, that you're outside the system? And I think that's really, really something that we need to think about more, especially when we talk about, like, of course now we have, like, the idea of Trump and Vance, but, like, the idea of, like, Vance, that was kind of a selection that was really kind of saying the quiet part out loud for someone, for the working class, the idea that this guy isn't really going to be a friend of the working class. He's going to make sure you get an enemy and make sure that this this show keeps going on, and you're even more invested and more distracted as a result. It's kind of it's crazy to think that this is where a lot of people are at now in terms of understanding, or not really, like, claiming this element of being an outsider. At some point, there's a situation where Korea's leader is, like, exposed for being advised by a mystic, or someone who's, like, talking to the dead for this person, and this is insane. But this person, like, has, like, this person's reading confidential documents. I'm not sure if it's pretty sure it's a woman, but I'm not sure. But I think it's like this person's reading confidential documents and, like, getting financial incentive, or getting, like, basically taxpayer money to essentially give mystic advice. And it is like it's an insane thought, but they have some pretty it was a con gone right, in my opinion, I would say. In terms of getting however much money, if it was something that was noticeable, if it I just got like X amount of money for the, I don't think it was anything that was modest. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it was a very much apparent, and it was just like, anyone charging you X amount, anyone charging, the government X amount for mystic advice, it better be some modest shit, and it better be, like, well publicized with everyone. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy to me. But it was something that this led to, like, a really big revolt, because this Korea's leader was exposed, for essentially, like, bring the entire public in with this, like, this person. It was crazy. Also, kind of like the element of religion, like, played into this, because it was just like one protest really originated from a politician making, like, comments against, like, I think the Quran. I think they were, like, speaking badly about the Quran in general, or some kind of verse or something in Quran, but this got a lot of people riled up, and it was it was pretty insane. But I mean, in terms of to think of it's insane in terms of the flip that switches with a lot of people, and I think we really should be more aware of, for instance, like the left is known for being anti-Christian and stuff like that, and I think we really in terms of moving on to the future, religion obviously has a role and a purpose. And the idea of speaking down on any religion, I don't think is right. But the element of how we fix this and how we move forward, I think, is more complicated than we really than a lot of what's publicized now. In terms of the ideal situation that I'd imagine us in, a lot of religions I expect, or I'd really like to get the same incentive that Christians and Christianity gets in America, and I expect really the idea of being religious having a hard line of, if you can't live amongst other people, then you can then obviously you need to be thought of as a little bit less American in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like, the coexisting of humanity is, I think, what gives us our platform to really do any type of policing, period, over our populace. And definitely, in terms of moving forward, definitely religion, in terms of these ideas of what we promote for society in the future. I think it does need to be really the energy of coexistence needs to be embedded, regardless of how important Christianity was to this, to the development, or to the foundation of this, in terms of moving forward. There needs to be an understanding that an understanding of coexisting with these religions, as well as them coexisting with us as well. Now, this idea of apparently this theme of misinformation, it really was thought to be kind of a boogeyman of the left, in terms of the blame for Trump came down to this idea of, let's blame the information that people are getting. And when it comes down to misinformation, I think of mainstream media is a huge source of misinformation to me, and I think a lot of, when it comes down to the destruction of this idea of misinformation being a danger to the public, I think we really need to understand who's in those seats, who's trying to make those decisions, because I mean, the idea of the idea of really being able to openly accuse any party of misinformation is crazy, knowing the history of America before the internet. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's insane to me. Like, you're looking for a way to get us in like endless wars and kill like any and everybody. Like like this is in terms of like governmental power and keeping governmental power, the idea of being willing to fight and die and having the younger people fight and die for you, being so instrumental to this idea is so like it's something that will accept misinformation for that purpose to keep, like it's like I think we definitely need to fix things, and we need to view this not as kind of a blame of misinformation, but a blame of really misrepresentation, period. um Another thing that this was kind of brought up, the idea of the CIA and eliminating people before elections come about. The CIA made it, kind of makes it a thing that when there is a populace, that could necessarily be a problem for the idea of large companies or democracy coming up to really make sure that it doesn't get to an election to where is a clear difference between eliminating someone before an election and before they're an elected official. In terms of policy wise, or policy wise, it's really seems to be something to where like once you get in the papers for being, or once you're established as a recognized leader of the people, eliminating you then would be a problem. So let's go ahead and get it over with. You know what I'm saying? Like it's definitely something. In terms of this, I mentioned before, there's a large swing from left to right, and a lot of when it came down to accusations, people were accusing the left of like selling baby bottles in the shapes of like penises, because that was like, I mean, they were making like it just came across like, in terms of really being in that stage now of really understanding a lot of things. I think YouTube awards what energizes people to click on videos in a way, shape, or form, and I think we get a lot of crazies in the media, but I don't, in terms of the idea of what's happening really versus what you can publicize, I think is something that we really do need to market and be more aware of. Lastly, no one knows when they're creating history. The idea of creating history and these protests forming, a lot of people aren't really aware, that of what could come, what can be a result of, whatever type of organizing that they do. And I think the nature of this book gives us it gives us an awareness that a lot of people don't have. And I mean, I encourage you to pick up the book and read it, but also like understand that the power in the book, a book like this, is really tremendous because of the understanding that comes across when, say, for instance, myself, I'd like to see the renovation of society, and I'm really hoping to contribute that in a lot of different ways. What happens now, in terms of after being exposed to this book, I understood like the idea of demands, how important that is to shaping the idea of an end of a protest. Really, the image of a protest fizzling out. I think we really have to think about these things a lot more. So we're really not just screaming into the void, saying, "Hey, we're upset. You fix this." Thank you. And I'm your bookman, Bookman Sleepy, and I am hope to see you soon. Hope to see you in another video. Like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're on podcast, make sure you subscribe. Thank you.